I think if you were to take the average American and you were to sit them down in a room and you were to make them watch the Madison Square Garden rally, I think they would probably tell you that it was an abject failure as far as political campaign events go. And maybe that is why the Trump campaign is actually trying to distance themselves from some of the rhetoric that was at that rally. But if you end up getting anything out of this video, please do remember to hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to make it to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I would very much appreciate your support. So as most of you have probably seen, the Trump campaign at Madison Square Garden didn't go so well if you are trying to attract new voters into your coalition right before the 2024 election. And you have probably seen that there have been some comparisons to the 1939's Hitler rally because of some of the rhetoric that was spewed at this event. There was a lot of hate, bigotry, racism. There was a lot of ultra-nationalistic type rhetoric. And so I think the Trump campaign has rightly identified that this could be a problem for them. And for those of you that don't know, this was the joke that kind of set the whole thing off.
You know, there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting there. Again, normally I don't follow the national anthem, everybody.
So obviously the joke wasn't that funny. Doesn't seem like it landed with the audience that well. And I think it's probably not a great idea to demonize a whole group of people based on their geographic location, especially because Puerto Ricans are American citizens. And so I think the Trump campaign rightly picked up that this could be a huge problem for them, especially since there is such a huge base of Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. And so you have Caroline Leavitt going out on Fox and Friends and trying to play cleanup.
But, you know, this morning, the mainstream media has picked up on the comics comments, which were offensive, have been denounced by the campaign and everybody else. What went on with that?
Look, it was a comedian who made a joke in poor taste. Obviously, that joke does not reflect the views of President Trump or our campaign. And I think it is sad that the media will pick up on one joke that was made by a comedian rather than the truths that were shared by the phenomenal list of speakers that we had. We had congressmen and women. We had Senator J.D. Vance. We had Dana White, friends of the president. Dan Scavino, my colleague and friend, who shared very intimate moments with President Trump when they were in the hospital in Butler, Pennsylvania, really showing the truth about President Trump and his heart of gold. And the crowd, they didn't mind, right? Again, it was a diverse group of people. The joke fell flat, but the crowd was there because they know who President Trump is, and they know he wants to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump wants to be president for all Americans. Oh, man. Oh, man. That's pretty funny. Because at the Madison Square Garden rally that everybody's talking about, there was a lot of talk about the Democrats being the enemy from within and that the press were the enemy of the people and that Kamala Harris, she's the devil and the Antichrist. That doesn't sound like the type of rhetoric that would be suitable for all Americans. So while the Trump campaign has rightly identified that this doesn't look good for them, I think they are missing the key point here. They keep on focusing on the superficiality of the comedian and the jokes that were told. But when we are talking about our criticism for the Madison Square Garden event, we are talking about the whole thing. We are talking about the encapsulation of what that rally represents. MAGA seems to be a movement that is driven by fear, division, and hate. And that came through in that rally. That is why it is bad for the Trump campaign. Not because some comedian told a bad joke about Puerto Rico. No. These guys are missing the forest through the trees. And then you have people like J.D. Vance that are just pretending that he didn't even hear the joke.
I haven't seen the joke. You know, maybe it's a stupid racist joke, as you said. Maybe it's not. I haven't seen it. I'm not going to comment on the specifics of the joke. But I think that we have to stop getting so offended at every little thing in the United States of America. I'm so over it.
Again, this is not just about the joke. And for J.D. Vance to pretend like he didn't even hear the joke when he was at the venue is quite wild and quite cowardly, if you ask me. We're talking about all of the other stuff that came along with the MAGA rally. We're talking about how you guys demonize immigrants and talk about them like they are the scum of the earth. How you don't distinguish between undocumented immigrants and legal immigrants. And you are promising to deport people with temporary protected status. And you talk about mass deportations, trying to get rid of 20 million people in this country. What about that stuff? And then you have people like Byron Donalds, who just doesn't even want to address any of the issue and just says, well, Trump's going to be great in 2024.
But I think there are people who watch the videos of either that comedian, by the way, the fellow who's on the radio, some of the other comments, and people just watch it. It's not the media telling them to watch it. You watch it and you say to yourself, this is not a great situation.
Watch Donald Trump. He's the one running for president, and he has the prescription to put this nation back on track and make it great again.
I'm glad we had you on. You were there. So Congresswoman Edwards, I don't know whether you wanted to weigh in on any of that. That's a good head shake anyway. We can glean from that. But
well, when you have a campaign that travels in racism, sexism, misogyny, and hatred,
Donna, you know better
it's
than
not
that.
a
Don't
surprise that this is where you end up.
That's not true.
It
That's simply
matters
not
who you
true.
surround yourself with, and
That's
Byron
simply not
Donalds
true.
knows that. Insulting.
That's simply not true, and you know that. You should be ashamed of
Insulting.
yourself. But thank you.
So instead of addressing any of the substance that people are rightfully worried about, Byron Donalds is just like, well, Donald Trump is going to be the better president. Does that negate everything that was said at the rally? People were talking about Kamala Harris like she was the devil and the Antichrist. Somebody said that she had pimp handlers. Just some casual racism. I just don't understand. If you're going to correctly identify a problem, why wouldn't you want to address that problem with the correct analysis? This is just another diversion tactic by the MAGA campaign. Like I said in one of my previous videos, I think this rally was the exact rally that Donald Trump wanted you to see. I don't even know what else to say. I don't think he cares, and I only think that it is the smart people in the Trump campaign that are actually identifying this as a problem for trying to build a larger coalition, and they are the ones trying to run cleanup. It's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump hasn't come out and said anything. He hasn't denounced some of the hateful rhetoric or the racist or the misogynistic rhetoric that people are talking about, and I don't expect him to. And then you have people like Scott Taylor here who just wants to try to both sides the whole issue.
I do think it was a very bad joke. I think it was insulting.
What about all the rest of it?
What about all the rest of it?
Yeah.
Well,
Are you okay
think,
with all of that?
Listen, I think emotions are very high. We're 8 days out from the election, right? No question about it. I don't think either side is innocent of inflammatory rhetoric, for sure. I mean, look what's happened. I don't think the president could have expected not to do this massive rally, which quite frankly was historic. Came out there and the media is just, oh, you know, he's a Nazi, it's Hitler, and all this crazy stuff that they were saying. So I think in many respects that rhetoric is much worse than what you just played there.
Just to be clear, Hitler has entered the conversation because his chief of staff said that Trump, not the media, but Trump was the one who brought up Hitler.
And Abby Phillips is exactly correct about that. It was Donald Trump's own people who came out and said that he fits the definition of a fascist. He would rule like a dictator if he was able to, and that he admired Hitler and his generals. It's not people on the left who have been just calling Donald Trump Hitler. We are making comparisons to some of his rhetoric to Hitler's rhetoric. We're not saying that these two people are the same, but people like Scott Taylor want to say that, oh, the left is just as bad as far as inflammatory rhetoric goes, when we are just calling out the truth as we see it, and we are making correct comparisons to what Donald Trump is actually saying. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump promising to use the United States military to go after the enemy from within, which he has identified as people like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi. These two things are not the same. And it really irritates me that these people continue to both sides this issue like we're on the same playing field when we are clearly not. Now, the only person that I listened to so far who has had a reasonable take on this was Megyn Kelly. Let's go ahead and listen to what she said.
I watched all of Trump's remarks, start to finish, and he did a great job. He made great points. He started with exactly the right question. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And he went on from there, just nailed it, all of his points. On message, entertaining, great. Trump was not well served by those around him last night. It wasn't a Nazi rally. All that's nonsense. But I'm telling you, even for me, and I voted for Donald Trump last week, it was too bro-tastic. Okay? It was. You're trying to win an election in which you're hemorrhaging female voters. Maybe when you present in front of hundreds, thousands at least, at Madison Square Garden, you clean up the bro talk just a little so you don't alienate women in the middle of America who are already on the fence about Republicans. Do they have no women advising their campaign? Is there no actual woman sitting behind the scenes, coming up with the guest lineup and saying, let's just have a word with the guys who are going to be speaking about this isn't the bar, this isn't their living room, this is a campaign, this is politics. We're trying to get him elected. We don't need to rally the base or guys anymore.
Now, obviously, I think it is pathetic that Megyn Kelly will not hold Donald Trump accountable for any of the things that he does. Donald Trump was the one who vetted the speakers that were going to speak. Donald Trump vetted the words that were going to be spoken on that stage. So he, in part, is responsible for some of the vitriol that we heard at that rally. But Megyn Kelly is correctly identifying that if you are trying to broaden your coalition as the Trump campaign, maybe you need to tone down the rhetoric just a bit. Maybe it's a little bit too extreme for the average American. I think she's right about that, but obviously I think she's wrong about Donald Trump not being held accountable for anything, trying to blame it on others around him when Donald Trump is one of the key purveyors of this type of rhetoric. Like I said, this was the rally Donald Trump wants you to see. It's only his campaign that is trying to play cleanup because they realize that this could be bad for them. And in fact, Donald Trump just came out and did a press conference, and he didn't really address this issue much at all.
And we have a coalition. Nobody's ever seen anything like, I don't think anybody has ever seen anything like what happened the other night at Madison Square Garden. The love in that room, it was breathtaking, and you could have filled it many, many times with the people that were unable to get in. But politicians that have been doing this for a long time, 30 and 40 years, said there's never been an event so beautiful. It was like a love fest, an absolute love fest, and it was my honor to be involved. And
so obviously, Donald Trump himself does not care. He's trying to say the whole thing was just a love fest. Just kind of like he said that the January 6th was a day of love. Donald Trump is counting on the fact that he can turn up more people that hate others to get him elected. That is Donald Trump's calculation, and even though his campaign has rightfully identified that this could be an issue for them, and that the rhetoric coming out of that rally was a bit intense, it was a bit unhinged, Donald Trump himself is not going to do a thing about it. So I thought this was interesting stuff. I think that the average American would look at that rally and they would not like what they saw. Because it was about fear, it was about division, it was about hate. Too much vitriol. You guys talk about other groups of people so poorly. And I don't think most Americans sign off on that type of stuff. So these are the things that we have to remember when we go vote in November. I'll leave it there. If you guys got anything out of this video, please do remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share it with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. Like I said, I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and I could very much use your support. If you want to see my breakdown of some of the hateful rhetoric that we saw at the Madison Square Garden rally, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.